Cool. Okay. So, so we're going to talk about today, like gig economy, but then I think or gigs, but I think that's really going to translate into not just gigs and like really how like price yourself basically, right? Like, what are you worth? What is your time worth? And it can be kind of strange, especially like, oh, people want to pay me for doing something. How does that work? And then the art of negotiation. I have a good experience with that, but it's not quite gig economy. So I'll save that for later because I just made a job offer this morning, or like actually a half hour ago. So what were you talking about? And if anyone, like always, I love to be interrupted. So please interrupt us and or put a question in the chat. This will be on YouTube, my YouTube afterwards. So please feel free to check that out if you miss anything. Hopefully it's helpful. We'll take comments, questions, I don't know, all that fun stuff. Anyway, Brigid, where were you? You were looking at gigs last week?
Yeah, so with the world kind of like reopening in some ways, in shapes and forms, I get gig requests and stuff sometimes, and I'm part of a couple like websites that you can have the free account and people like try to reach out to you. A lot of times like they don't understand what they're wanting. They just want entertainment, and they're like, oh, here's someone who does fire, like let's ask for them. And just kind of figuring out, like sometimes it's a sticker shock when people try to book a fire performer or someone professional mermaid, still walker, where people are like, why does it cost that much? And it's like, I could break it down. Like I could tell you every single line item of how I get to that cost. But again, as you were saying, like those are some of the boring behind the scenes stuff that some people don't care about or understand.
But how do you initially like price yourself, right? Because I mean, it's one thing, you go to buy something, there's a set price, there's no haggling, bartering, negotiation. I feel like us who are neurodiverse are generally not very good at that. I am not good at it, meaning it's all I do. Everything is a bet / a competition for me. So I have a client who passed away. He was a mutual client of one of my good friend, one of my best friend and colleagues. So, and he had ALS. His name was, I can't say his name, but he was a really great guy. Really liked working with him and want to do something nice. And part of my business is really, we're one of the first calls people get when somebody passes away because it's money, financial. Same with the attorney. So I asked the attorney what he does, because like flowers are a card, just never like seemed like quite right. The person personally. We have maybe a couple hundred good clients where we know them well. A lot of ways they're like friends, if not family to us. And so I asked what he did, and he plants trees. So I told the person who works for me, you have to one up him, right? And this is like is it arbor or something? I don't know, something where it's like planting trees for donation purposes. I said, we need to do better. So we found a forest that was called the Superior Forest. I don't know if it's actually superior, but it had superior in the name. And then I planted double the amount of trees.
I found like you just found a forest near Lake Superior.
That was my guess, but it didn't matter because I was just trying to one up him, and it was called the Superior Forest. And then I planted double the amount of trees in his name. So that was really non sequitur, but the point is, how do you know how many trees to plant? I just wanted to do more than my friend. How do you know how much to charge somebody? Like when it's not clear, like it's not like who here. Okay. Type it in the chat. I have no idea how much Brigid charges for anything. Okay. Brigid, can you like tell us a gig and let's guess what you would charge? Just tell us like the gig.
Okay. Put me on the spot. Okay. A half hour choreographed fire performance, including fire breathing, at a major like corporate event. So half hour choreographed fire performance, including fire breathing at a large corporate event.
Okay, guys, either say it out loud or type it in the chat. Like, what do you think? Now, is it just you? Is it other people?
Well, with me as part of my team, it comes with me and a trained safety professional. I'll add, I live in Portland, Maine.
Yes. So I don't know if you're seeing there's 300 to 500, 500, 800. I said 2000.
Is no one gonna play the Price is Right game and guess a dollar? I totally can. It's wrong.
Yeah.
Well, wait a second.
I don't think you charge below 300, so I don't think that's a good idea.
Daniel, that needs commas. That's a lot. I wish I could charge that much. Yeah, so technically Andrew would be closest. So like around the $2,000 range. Why? Well, because I have insurance. I'm a trained.
And by the way, I just know about insurance, and I know that insurance for what she does happens to be expensive. That was the reason I guessed higher. Nobody else should be expected to know that.
Yeah. But again, I'm a trained professional. I have like costumes that would go with the theme. Choreograph means that you're spending time before you ever step foot in an event. So think of going to a craft show. You're gonna want to also be charging for not just your final product, but also think about the time and energy it took into making that product. So you're not just gonna want to charge for materials. Like even some of my friends who I buy stuff and they're like, I'll just charge you material costs. I'm like, no, like your time and energy is valuable, especially for everyone, but more so I feel like for people that have chronic illnesses and disabilities, because a project that might take someone a week to complete might take you a month to do the exact same amount of work, because hey, life happens. And so there's so many things that go into pricing. And if we're talking about gigs, we're also including stuff like arts and crafts. We're talking about like the supplies needed. There's a lot that, again, behind the scenes goes into things.
Yeah, and the other thing too is I can't remember the exact quote. It disappoints me because it was really good, but it was basically like, you're not getting paid, $500 an hour for an hour's worth of work. You're getting paid $500 an hour for the decades that you have spent learning, doing, prepping, etc.
So that's actually a conversation I had recently with someone who said, yeah, like some people in the area are charging ridiculous prices. Now, living in Portland, Maine, I'm only about an hour and a half away from Boston. In Boston, people absolutely come up here to do gigs and performances, and they get paid well. But I said, okay, outlandish prices. What are you thinking? He was like $500 for an hour of fire spinning. And I'm like, well, how many times are you going to spin fire in an hour? Like, there is no prop that you just light on fire and spin it for an hour straight. Like that would be a blowtorch, which I'm sure like spinning a blowtorch is totally a thing. And now I'm probably going to go down a YouTube rabbit hole after this. But having done like 45-minute gigs, like that's a lot of time, effort, and wear and tear on your body, your props. I'm doing a lot better health-wise and stuff, but years ago, like my disabilities really flared up in addition to a car accident, and I would need to take time off to recover after doing a gig. Thankfully, I'm doing better, but as I was telling them, if you break down all of your price points and you're getting paid less than you would at your day job or losing money, like a lot of people still underprice themselves so much that after gas, tolls, time, effort, costuming, they're losing money. And that's when you need to take a step back and go, what is the goal of this? And also look around and see, like, I've been undercut by people. I'll try to have conversations because, hey, if you're spinning fire for an hour for like free entry and a drink ticket, like that's hurting the same person who's trying to go for the gig and getting paid well.
So now, but like, so we're talking about gig and like pricing yourself and what you're worth. How did you decide? I mean, other than, you can't lose money. So if your insurance is 500, you can't charge 300, right? So, and I could spend this whole time talking about insurance, but we just won't do that. I will spare everyone. Okay. And then, but let's say that you have no costs. Like, is there an event where there are no costs, where it's literally just an hour of your time? Like, how do you decide how much to price? And what do you do when somebody says the 2000? And by the way, I had no idea. I just know insurance world, and I figured her insurance is like 500, 1,000, and but like, how do you decide that you're worth that much, and or people are willing to pay that much? Because some people will balk at the 2,000, and some people will be like, where do I send the check, or what's your PayPal? Right? And who's the right one? Where's the reasonable one? Just talk about that, like pricing, like valuing yourself and your worth, basically.
Well, this is like a financial webinar, so I'm not
talk about whatever you want.
I'm not gonna go into like, let's talk about trauma. But like, it's important.
It is important if you did want to, like, that is. But anyway, continue.
It's one of those things where like, there will always be people who do stuff for free. There will always be artists who just give away their stuff. Why? Because that's what they want to do. And there are absolutely gigs that I donate my time, energy for. I'll still write them up an invoice sometimes, like for their records of, hey, here's how much this gig will cost. It's a donation because they're a real legit nonprofit. Like, I've encountered so many people that are like, we're doing a nonprofit gig, and I'm like, what's your EIN? And they're like, what's that? And I'm like, you're not a nonprofit. Please stop saying that. I take issue with people that say that they're nonprofits when they're not. That's a personal pet peeve of mine.
That has to be illegal.
It's strongly frowned upon. There is no actual, like, some people just think that you can I had to explain to someone a couple of years ago how you can't just stick LLC at the end of your performance name and have it mean something. How LLC is actually a real, yeah, that face. I'm like, yeah. See, the thing is, one of the reasons why I've been performing and stuff like for years and years, and I've gotten to where I am in part, is because I like some of this background stuff. Like, I don't need to be in front of like the stage sometimes. I think that stage managers, and hey, I was a techie. Like, I'm really good operating like a light board. Like, you put me in front of that, so much fun. But I think as a performer, as an artist, musician, whatever, you have to think of, what is your goal? Is your goal to like go out there and perform? Like community theaters, like not everyone gets paid to do that stuff, but there might be something inside you that just needs to create that type of art. I do like festivals, but I don't do them that much. I do them very selectively, because in my 20s, I did that whole thing where you live out of your car for a summer and you just travel around and perform. And I am too old for that. Like, no, like, that's not a thing. I prefer like gigs where I am working with families, where I'm working with like communities, giving back. that's why I've changed my focus. And that's why I branched out into other areas like teaching as well as performing. Because I think it's really important to find out what your passions are and follow them.
I mean, that's just like perfect advice in general, right? So just follow your passion, and yeah. So do you have a story or two? No, I'm just liking this gig stuff, like where you severely underprice yourself. And I can talk for a little bit because like I'm in kind of sales too, not like quite a gig economy, right? Um, but like I have to like quote my price and my worth and like undervaluing yourself. And I can talk about that in general too, because so a lot of what I do, nobody knows what I do. If you've seen how or like Friends, right? Like is it Chandler who they don't know what he does, or is that's Ross? One of them.
Ross
Nobody
is a
knows.
professor.
Not
Also,
Ross.
like really topical reference there.
Yeah, no. Okay, fine. Anyway, I'm thinking of like Barney from How I Met Your Mother. That's what I'm thinking of, but then my mind isn't with Friends. Anyway, side note. So my point is nobody really knows what I do, but a lot of the ways I can be compensated are very confusing for even people in my industry. But what was hard is, so I would get paid when somebody bought something, right? So they wanted my service and it was all pre-negotiated, right? There was no me having the ability to charge them more. It was built into like, think of like if you buy something for $50 and you have to sell it for $100, right? Like that's just like how it was. But when I started charging a fee for my advice, so this was no product, this is like paying it like a consulting fee. And we do much more of that now. At first, I'm like, why would anyone pay for this? Like, I'm going to offer this for free. And I was just so undervaluing my advice and all that I do beyond just, like there's more value that I'm adding. So I'm being able to say, here is the reason that we add value. Here are the other things that we do, right? What I've noticed now is when I first charged, I remember this, I charged $600. It was probably 10 hours worth of work. Talk about severely undervaluing yourself. And I think I had to like, not like convince, the other person to, pay for it, but it was harder. Now, I mean, if I quote 1,500, there's like no questions usually, or 3,000. For the time and advice, but that also allows me to also offer some pro bono, right? Because I'm charging some people more. If you're familiar with like a sliding scale, right? We don't like to turn away anybody, right? So
the worst phrase, like just to cut in, explaining like the circus programs that I help create, and trying to say sliding fee scale repeatedly is just like a horrible tongue twister that I'm way too familiar with.
Yeah. And I actually asked a bunch of financial planners, does anyone have like a sliding scale? And they were all like, just turn away people who can't pay you. We're like, that's not what we're going for. Thank you, assholes. We're all adults here, and if we're not,
Yeah.
and if you don't know me, then I don't even know why you're on this. So, but
I was trying to know me.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think to transition, because again, this webinar is targeted towards autism in some ways. There's so many self-advocates out there that do have information. You might not realize it, but people should be compensated for their time, their effort, their energy. That,
yes,
hey, like when it comes to like presentations, like there are some conferences that I go to that I pay for, or like I have to pay for a hotel room. It's not all inclusive. And then there are some of my friends that they travel all over and don't really spend a dime. And I think part of it is something that we talked about earlier of knowing your worth. Yes. And maybe not even the financial worth, but taking a step back and thinking about your strengths. a friend of mine who passed away this past winter, we had some conflicts back and forth just because of our autism. It was, I'm sure all of y'all kind of know when the autism conflicts. And she would say,
having autism as the character trait in common in itself is not enough.
Right. Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Yeah, everyone used to try to hook me up with their autistic sons when I was younger, because they're like, look, you're an autistic
that
girl.
Was bad for
like,
a few reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, yo, okay, you got any autistic daughters around too? Like, hey. But my friend was always so hard on herself and did not see her worth, would do these things all the time for free and didn't think that she had anything to kind of impart. And part of the reason why I do so much and I'm getting more and more visible is honestly because I've been doing stuff behind the scenes for well over a decade. And as I've told Andrew on another podcast, it's like, yeah, I was fine being in my 20s and not being in a public spotlight. Why? Because, well, MTV Real Life, I'm autistic, didn't want me. And now, yeah, I'm in my early 30s. I'm okay with who I am. I feel like I'm more of a fully formed adult and slash mermaid. But it's taken a while through trauma, through rejection, through acceptance, to figure out what my worth is, whether it's financial worth or, hey, yeah, I can be part of this committee of people that are talking about healthcare priorities for autistic people, and being like, yeah, I don't feel like an imposter there, which imposter syndrome is its own evil beast that I feel impacts the gig economy, artists, advocacy world. Would you like to talk about being an imposter, Andrew?
I feel like an imposter a lot of the times because I get told like, oh wait, there's no way you're not an extrovert. I'm like, no, I'm totally an introvert. Because like if you get somebody talking about one of the things they really like to talk about, like that's great. So for like me, so like I don't have as many special interests as Brigid, right? Because nobody does. But like for one, I get people pay me to talk about what I love to talk about all day, right? But also on the other hand, wait, what was the question again?
Are you an imposter?
Oh, yes. So like I feel like one sometimes because I'm an introvert who's like in like an outgoing role, right? And like, you know, I don't do social things for no reason. Like I don't do social things with like social events. Like golf is supposed to be like a literal job requirement in my industry. Like everyone in finance golf. I hate golf. I'm not doing golf. No, ever. Like I'm not like, but I just feel like sometimes I don't like belong here, or now I've started to get like either like some traction or success or like good things happen and I feel like I don't deserve it too. Or like, wait, why is, as much as it seems like I can like, I present a very narcissistic personality if somebody knows me very well, but my ego actually like is like fragile. But I think it's like putting that out there is helpful. Or if somebody sees me on social media and LinkedIn, it like looks like I'm not being fake, but on the other hand, it takes like real effort. Like I'll give an example. I am not a morning person, but I wake up at 6 o'clock every morning.
Ew.
Well, because I can get to work early, it's quiet. I can plan my day. It's part of my routine, but I am not a morning person. Was that an example of an imposter? I think I went off on a really weird track. So reel me back in. I have no idea where I went.
Yeah, no. So it's hard to kind of value yourself when you do feel like, hey, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop and everyone's going to look around and realize, I don't know what I'm talking about. And I think for a lot of us who are autistic in different ways, shape, or form, we're kind of trying to navigate the world. And we walk around sometimes being like, everyone else has the instruction manual and we don't. The spoiler is that no one has the instruction manual, and everyone is not as confident as they may appear. Like there's one of those like cross stitches of like a blessing of like, may you have the confidence of a mediocre white male. And my
I
friend,
like that.
oh, you've never heard that before? My friends and I,
Nah.
like, it's a thing. Because like it's not so much in the like neurodiverse field, except like
Yeah.
I've met some of them, like they still exist. But more of like the neurotypical guy who doesn't know what he's talking about, that just barges in and tries to mansplain. Like we see all those like memes and stuff where like someone's trying to correct an actual like rocket scientist on Twitter, and she's like, this is literally my job. uh and I think part of it, I say blessed therapy. I've been in trauma informed care therapy for years, because I didn't think I was worth anything, and then trying to price yourself in a gig life, and being like, no, actually my skills, my services, it's worth it. My autism background, like, hey, I'm worth it. Because in all fairness, I feel that everyone's worth it and we should have universal basic income. Uh,
Speaking of that, as a libertarian, like the people who don't think the government should build roads, I actually even agree with you on universal basic income, but that's another day.
that's another day.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll just yell at the screen and stuff for like half an hour of this is why we need this. The biggest cause of death is poverty.
Yes.
Tangents, we're good at those. So gig life. I think one of the questions that I got is about stability. And when your income is sporadic, when you're doing the gig stuff, how do you find some type of stability in your life, especially if you're creating product that you're also going to be selling? And I think stability, I know I'm that type of autistic, that I love stability, but I can't create it for myself. I love schedules. Like I excelled in college when my day was planned from 7:30 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. As a adult, I'm so bad at creating my own schedules.
We were just talking about, right? I think it was even before we started the Zoom, we were just catching up, and how it's summer and everyone's canceling on me. And I'm like, yes, because like an airline overbooking, like I count on so many people postponing a day. Like that is part of my schedule, my routine. I know that, like, I don't know who, but I know I will have free time this week. I know that my schedule will change. That's also partially why I get in the morning. I block out certain days to do things because I know that every day in what I do is very different. But that's also why I'm like, I don't have a routine. And my wife like wanted to slap me like across the room. Like, you're ridiculous. You're like the most routine oriented person I've ever met. But in my schedule, my calendar is full and booked. It can just move around. Right. But like, I plan on that. So actually it was when my calendar did not get moved around, I got really screwed up. But I think if you're like a gig and it's not a full-time job and it's 9 to 5, it's good and bad. You have the flexibility to work when you want, right? Because you don't have anyone telling you to finish a project, but then you also don't have anyone telling you to finish a project.
Right. I like the idea of accountability buddies. Like I have a few of them where it's just people in different areas and we just message each other being like, what are you up to? You should do this thing that you said you were doing 2 days ago. I'm really also good at pretending that I'm doing something for someone else. Like I also have that kick in reflex where if I'm doing something for someone else, it supersedes doing it for myself. I also have been working on something for like this entire week, and instead I did a really thorough cleaning job of the kitchen today because that was more entertaining than doing this thing that would probably only take me 15 minutes. But I think also it's hard to find balance and structure with the gig life, creating healthy boundaries to yourself, and sometimes saying no. You can want to do something, and you shouldn't.
Say
You were
that one
saying
more
like,
time. Say that again.
you can want to do something and you shouldn't. So I was laughing as you're like, a gig life where it's not 9 to 5. So before my car accident, I was a full-time performer. Like, man, I was doing like show or two a week, teaching after school programs for about 15 hours a week and working 40 hours a week. When did I sleep? Well, I kind of didn't. Like someone was like, you can't have 2 full-time jobs. I'm like, you shouldn't. I did, because I didn't know how to say no. And I wanted to do things. And part of it too, I feel, is we live in a capitalistic dystopian society that values the financial product too over our health and well-being at times. So that face. But I feel like in this past year, having had the time and energy to stop and evaluate what it is that I want to be doing, putting energy in creating, whether they be gigs or creating other tangible things. It's like I found rhinestoning. Like I've been blinging things out. Like through my mermaid life, I've been creating costumes and stuff that I had never really done before, like fire safe costumes versus mermaid costumes where you swim in. Completely different, literally completely different realms. And I think just like how relationships with other people change, you're not necessarily the same person you were in middle school or high school. So you might not still be friends with some of those people. I think it's also important that we take survey every once in a while of what are the creative outlets that give us strength, power, and that also applies to jobs too. Like a friend of mine just posted about how she had quit her job recently and was no longer having the Sunday anxiety day. Where it's your day off, but you're anxious that you have to go back to that soul-sucking job the next day, and how that can really affect your health and well-being. Do you have something you want to add? You look like you're going to say something.
I was thinking, but then there was just like so much like good stuff to say. So then I didn't have anything.
Okay. Just like,
yeah, no, I mean, no, it's just like, so, oh no, I did have, there's a quote I like that's like the difference between successful people and really successful people is the latter say no to almost everything.
you know what? Honestly, when the first time that I actually started to get well-paying gigs as a performer was when I started saying no. When like you can be courteous, you can be professional, but when you start having healthy boundaries with yourself and prioritizing your time, your well-being, your energy, things do open up a bit more, which is, hey, the universe can kick us a lot of times, but sometimes it ends well.
I do want to set a few, and I want your opinion, Brigid, and I want to talk about the flip side though. And let's talk about specifically like autism, like advocates. And guys, if you have questions, we've just been talking. If you couldn't tell, we can do that. That is not a problem. We don't need you in the nicest way possible, but you're here.
We love you. And
yes.
What Andrew is trying to say as the new co-host of this, I have a feeling I'm going to be interrupting him sometimes. Thank you all for coming to this. We really appreciate all your live feedback. We'll be changing things up so that Andrew is not disparaging to everyone, but thank you for being here and thank you for watching after the fact too.
Yes. So, and it is summer too, so a little less people here today than sometimes. So that also makes complete sense too. I think it's a nice day out. I don't know. I don't like lights, so the windows are closed, and I haven't really looked outside since 6 a.m.
My window is open, so if it sounds weird, it's in parts so that I'm not all sweaty and gross, and the kitties are in the window behind me.
What was I going to say, Brigid, before we told them?
You were saying how wonderful I was.
Well, yeah, probably, but what else? I think it was about how,
Oh, the flip side of
yeah, so the
autism
flip
advocacy.
side.
Yeah.
So I also think, and I'm gonna try. Brigid is also gonna probably have to do this again, where she like corrects with what I meant to say. And
Think
that is,
before you speak, Andrew. This is this. We're not going to cut this like we have for other podcasts.
yes. Hey, I'm on it though. So okay, but no, what I'm saying is like, I also see like, it's one thing, but don't use that as an excuse for not either helping people or volunteering. I guess I see people say no to something, say, well, why aren't you paying me? Right. And they're saying that to the wrong people.
Yes.
Right.
This is the, we need a punch up. You only punch up, you don't punch down.
Oh, can you talk about, because you are saying better, you are saying what I wanted to say, but more eloquently, obviously.
Cool.
So,
Here, I'll
okay.
I'll suck your brain in. Yeah, no. So there are events, conferences, speaking engagements, writing things that I've done, other people have done that you don't get compensated for. In I've done performances that no one's being compensated for. Why? Because there's not funds. Like, it's for a charity, for a fundraiser. It's a new autism centric magazine by autistic creators. It's important to understand that sometimes there is not the direct funding there to pay us, but we can use other funding sources like, hey, I would love to come and speak to your institution. Do you think that we can work with maybe the local university to get some funding for this, or getting sponsorships? There are a lot of, I'm going to use the financial
Please.
thing. There are a lot of banks that actually do really good volunteer work, that have community-based grants, that, hey, if you want to have maybe one of the things that me and, I'll name drop, Stephen Shore, like, want to have like maybe a conference, more of a creativity based autism conference, because a lot of autism conferences are like just educational based. And we know that creativity is awesome. It helps people. Hey, I'm a mermaid. So looking for different funding sources so that we can put together, so that we don't have to just donate time and energy. There's a whole separate conversation to be had about reparations. And as someone who is very white, I feel that it's really my job to say we do need to prioritize paying BIPOC for their time, effort, energy, because for too long they have been ignored in most conversations, but very especially in disability-centric focused conversations. So their expertise honestly should be given more. I would very gladly be on a panel with someone who was getting paid and donate my time to that if there were only a certain amount of funds, which I feel like sometimes, even though I have multiple disabilities, I'm poor, I'm still white. So there's also that part when it comes to pricing out. I know that may have gone a different direction, but yeah.
No, I thought that was good. I also think when it comes to conferences, like, what's really funny is, like, there's getting paid to speak at conferences, but then there's the flip side where a lot of conferences, they asked about biopic, Brigid, if you want to type, I saw that.
Black, Indigenous, people of color.
Yes. So not me or Brigid.
Not, yeah, I'm melanin deficient. I fully admit that.
So, but there's also, so there's two flip sides. So I was part of a nonprofit, and their biggest fundraiser of the year was like an autism resource fair. And they had, quote, workshops, not speakers. Now, most of them didn't have autism, and it was providers and things. But in a lot of these nonprofit events that usually are exclusive of us, not inclusive, think about like service providers and boring people like financial people, we're paying to advertise, basically. Right. So like, but you're also giving money to the nonprofit, right? Too, because you like to support them. Maybe they have a booth, but like the top tier required a lot more money for me to be paid to speak. That was an advertising fee, right? That was very different than me providing value. They were providing me value. So I'm going to use Brigid. Can I talk about you and the gig on this podcast? Do you mind if I disclose?
Sure, you can talk about me.
Okay. So
I don't know where you're going with this, but go ahead.
I'm going to say how much I pay you, or that I pay you. So Brigid did not ask for compensation for this podcast. I offered to compensate her. Now, I had a previous guest where we both had our own businesses too that aligned, right? So for me, this is about me giving back. This is about me taking, when I charge somebody $3,000, but it's also when I'm talking to employers and I do some presentations, a lot of the autism friendly employers or clients, I say, look, hey, if anyone wants to come and ask these questions, they can come. This is here every month. Here's the YouTube. So for me, it's a way to help more people and offer something as part of like my company. And now, but if somebody was joining me and they had another brand that they were promoting, right? And people, they might get business from it. Like Brigid, if you were like if you were, I don't know, like a bank. I'm trying to think of an example, but if you were like me, then maybe you wouldn't ask to get paid to talk about it because maybe it's spreading brand awareness and doing some things like that. But now there's nothing that really translates money into anything that Brigid would want to charge for, right? So I think that's an important distinction is, with the exposure. And for the record, she didn't ask me. I just wanted to. I don't know if she would ask. She's nice and we've known each other. I feel
if it was gonna be a regular gig, I would absolutely ask.
Good.
Yeah, so, no.
But that's how it should be. I didn't wait for her to ask. I just said, right? Because, and she's like, fantastic, we're friends, but it's still like work, right? And so, I mean, hopefully it's fun. Hopefully it's some of the better work that she has. But like, it's still fun. And that's just like paying somebody and valuing them for your worth. Or like, if I do a podcast or I'm asking somebody to speak where I know they won't be compensated, I will actually take into account whether that quote exposure is legitimate and would actually really help their brand. So, because for me, and a lot of other businesses, advertising is very expensive. Google makes all their money off advertising, literally all of it. TVs, advertising is such a huge business. It's insane. And it's expensive for businesses. So, I look at it as, well, there's advocacy, there's advertising, and then there's something kind of in the middle, like, exposure. I don't look at it as I'm not being compensated for my time. If I'm asked to speak at an event on, like, Brigid asked me to speak about ABLE accounts with the Autism Society of Maine, right? I gave great information to a bunch of individuals. I know I helped a bunch, and, I know that if my name comes up in the future, that people will remember I helped them, that I did a good job, that they'll come to me. But I also am able to do that. And I'm at the point of my business where I can. Not everyone also has that privilege. I guess this is an extremely long-winded way of coming back to saying no is really important, but also being upset that a nonprofit with literally no money is not making money off you either. It's not like they're exploiting you. You're both kind of volunteering. Brigid, how does someone tell the difference?
So transparency. Yeah. Again, I run a nonprofit. And I've been a part of nonprofits. I can say, for example, there's a festival I've worked with that we did not get paid. We haven't gotten paid yet. It's a couple of years later. They've been totally honest and transparent about financial burdens. Like, I'm actually, again, good friends with this person and want their business to go well. And the partnerships that we actually end up doing together, she had said the same thing of like, we can't afford to pay what you're actually worth, but maybe we can do something else. And so in regards to the gig economy, in regards to autism advocacy in general, being an artist, thinking about what are the relationships that you want to have, both professional and personal. There are some people I will not do business with because it's not in my moral compass. It's not something that my brand and stuff does. That doesn't mean I like look down upon it. It's just like I am more of a family entertainer. Like that's what I do. Like that's kind of the outlets that I enjoy. Why? Because well, that's me. That makes me feel comfortable. I would turn down a gig that didn't align with what I wanted to do purely because, well, like there's some things that money can't replace, like moral compass wise. And talking
So
about,
are you saying like more, I mean, everyone has a price,
yeah,
but at the same time, you know, if it's like an organization where you believe in your mission, then you should more easily volunteer. Because then I look at it as volunteering. Then you look at it as advocacy, not your business. It could be like a hard separation.
yeah. So I know that I'm weird. I have been volunteering since I was literally in elementary school. I've gotten volunteer awards my entire life. Why? Because my mother raised me to volunteer and help other people. Even though I run a nonprofit, I volunteer my time at other nonprofits. I donate blood. I give of myself quite literally as much as I can to help other people because that's what makes me feel good. And that's also why I perform, because I want to spread that joy and happiness. So there are definitely organizations that can't afford me, or ones that I just reach out to and am like, hey, what can I offer you guys? What can I do to help? I'll plug it. There's a bridge in Ogunquit that is falling apart. I love the town and have said to everyone, I'm like, what can I do to help? I want to raise funds for this. How can I help? I help raise funds for the Autism Society of Maine, Autism Society of America, not just as like, hey, I'm a pageant girl, Miss Mermaid Maine, which I'm totally plugging now. I'm in the finals for Miss Mermaid USA, and we shall see how I do by the next episode.
Yeah.
But I think it's important just to like do volunteer work and help other people. Why? Because the world is gross enough as it is. So if something I can do can help someone else, kind of be a butthead to not do it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but how else can somebody, if they're unsure, like they're just getting started, somebody asks them to speak because they're autistic, right? And where is the line? Well, I feel like when you're more established and you know the players, right? It's easier to be like, if I don't know, I can ask Brigid, hey, what do you think of this person? Or Brigid can ask me, or
And we have done that. Like
yeah.
that's
You
not
ever
even
ask me? I think it's mostly me asking you because you've been doing this 20 plus years, but like, you know, I mean, you could ask me if it was like somebody at like the state treasurer's office of Pennsylvania or something strange where I'd happen to know them or something. Right. But no, but in all seriousness, like how is that truly the answer? Find somebody you trust, like find your Brigid. We should make that like a hashtag. Find your Brigid.
Find your Brigid. Ooh, I like that. But for me, it's more like actually find your Val. Valeria Paradis is amazing. If people know who she is. But again, she mentored me first. And when it came to like negotiating my price, she was like, now I'm hiring you. So let's have a conversation pretending I was a client. And like, she helped guide me through some of that. If you don't have if you don't have a Brigid or a Val near you, there are options on the internet. I feel like next time maybe we can talk about like maybe contracts or something like that. But I think it's really important to figure out again your whys. Why are you doing this? Are you performing to get on stage? Are you performing because you need money? Because there's also nothing wrong with having a roof over your head and having food on your plate. Like there are gigs that I've taken for less than like standard industry price sometimes because I really need the funds. And that's also totally valid because life happens. So I think it really comes down to, should I work with so and so? Should I take this gig? Should I sell there? Thinking to yourself, what is your end goal? What do you want to be doing down the line? I know of some people that love doing craft fairs. I hate craft fairs. Like you're interacting with way too many people for my comfort level. And I would rather do one high price corporate gig a month than doing festivals every single weekend for a month and not coming close to the same cost. Like, so you have to figure out what it is that is your goal and what matters most to you.
I also, that was perfect. Like I have like nothing like to add, right? But I also want to say that there's something to be said for, if somebody values your time, but again, it's about showing them the value. So with Brigid, it's not about explaining all the reasons she has to charge $2,000 for the fire. It's explaining how like the value, right? Like, like what are you providing more? So like for me, something that I've learned, and sometimes it takes a long time, and I'm learning like a bit more like every like day, like how to like describe things better in like a good way. And I love like the light bulb moment where it's like something that small shouldn't matter. It's the same. It's how it's being framed. But also like, what's amazing is if like I look back to like people I started working with, and let's say they turned into big accounts, let's say, or clients that have made me lots of money or opened tons of doors for me, right? A lot of those things came from, just working with good people. When somebody asks how much I charge, my answer is it depends how much I like you, which is the truth. I'm not saying we don't have like a kind of set fee schedule, but like, and if somebody doesn't laugh at that, I mean, because I don't, we just don't do gigs with people. And we can, but generally like we're working with people for like the rest of their lives, or that's our goal. Hopefully it's theirs. So like if I don't like you, like I'm not going away, right? In theory, unless you fire me. Like why are you gonna continuously work with someone you don't like? So yeah, that's my answer. And it's really funny when like the wife is like, oh, crap, we're in trouble. My husband is, like, yeah, but you're okay, so it'll even out. But it's like always so I think it's just a way of, but I guess what I'm saying is experience can be valuable too. So undercharging yourself, like Brigid said, isn't just for the money. It can also be because you're trying something new, right? And if you have the right person, so for example, I hired somebody new and we took on a new client who I mean, it's not that we wouldn't have helped them, but we wouldn't have charged them, and we would have like pointed them the direction of free resources, answered their questions, a lot less hand-holding. But because I had brought on somebody new and it was a good learning experience, and this person hadn't like done some of this process before, we even said, look, we're going to charge you less. We know we're undercharging you. If you bear with us, it's our first time. But I mean, you have to judge that situation carefully. But in this one, it worked out great for a lower price or free, right? She got me. I mean, I should be upcharging, obviously. But no, I mean, but she also, but then, we just asked, hey, bear with us, be gentle. right? If we make them a, thing or two, we'll fix it. I don't know if you have a good example or relation into that. And I know we're getting close to an hour.
Like, to work on wrapping things up, I get asked a lot, again, talking about pricing. I have people that undercut. Sometimes they don't know better. And again, the more you know, the more you know. So I get asked sometimes, how can I compete with the people who are charging $25 an hour to spin a bunch of fire? And the response from me and other professionals is don't. Like, again, kind of what Andrew's saying, don't ever diss the other people because they may not know better. They may have different circumstances that you don't know about, just like how I needed that one gig to afford rent. Maybe it's the same for them too. And instead highlight why you are awesome, why you should get compensated, whether it's education, life experience, volunteering. I've gotten jobs. I got my first job based on my volunteer work, and my volunteer stuff, like, very expansive. Highlight that, highlight your strengths. And I think it's a good thing too to help boost out others around you. I share my contracts with anyone, like any performer who asks for it. Like, I share like some of my layout plans and stuff. Why? Well, in part because I never had that. I had to create all that on my own. And when other people know what they should be charging and value their time and effort too, guess what? We're all going to get higher wages, higher pay from it, because everyone's starting to value themselves. And I think that's really my end goal, is for people to be compensated fairly for their time, effort, energy, and skill.
And I think, no, that was awesome. Thank you. I just want to say that I really think it's about focus. You want to pay attention to competition, but at the same time, there's a lot of people who get so focused on competition who's not really the competition, and putting it in perspective. Like, I will admit, because there are so few people who do what I do very specialized, I get salty, for lack of a better term, when I see somebody else being recommended.
But
or I
Andrew,
yeah.
You have to remember, the most wonderful thing about Tigger is I'm the only one.
Yes. And sometimes it's not all about you either, right? No, that was a good one. Sorry, but like but at the end of the day, it's like, what is the goal? What's the end result you're doing? And I just want to put it in perspective. And then I'm like, okay, if I'm trying to serve neurodiverse individuals, 1 out of 5 of the country is neurodivergent. That's 60 million people. If I say autism without ID who are adults, I've done this math earlier today, it's about 1 to 1.5 million people in the country, right? So if, like, I'm the only person I know really targeting that population, wait, I can only have a few hundred clients. Why am I upset? Right? Because last thing, if you have an idea, if there's nobody else doing the idea, then you should get concerned. Right? That is one of the best things I ever learned when I was looking into, like, a quote, like, startup and a new idea. It was, oh no, there's somebody else trying to do something similar. Here's why you might be better. But if you're trying to start your own category, start your own thing, your question should be, why has nobody else done it? And there may be reasons that you aren't thinking of. So in that way, competition is a good thing, right? If that makes sense. Do you have any thoughts, Brigid, in closing? And if anyone has any questions?
Again, juggling blowtorches. I don't know of anyone who does that. I know of someone who extinguishes blowtorches on their tongue and is in the Guinness Book of World Records for it. But again, like, you question, like, I think it's a good thing. Competition can be good. Competition can be healthy. From a psychology standpoint, envy can actually be motivational because you're wanting what other people want. Jealousy, you're wanting to take from other people. So just to kind of from the psychology standpoint of it too, you should have fun with what you're doing.
Yes.
If you're actively choosing to like do a hobby, like I can't stress out as I'm working on competing for Miss Mermaid USA, because that's kind of hysterical, and it's fun, and it should be fun. uh life's too short, so if you're not enjoying a hobby or a gig that you're actively choosing to do and you're privileged enough to be able to do it, look at why you're stressed. Are you trying to compete with someone else? Are you stuck in how you should be, or are you holding yourself to unrealistic expectations? Or like asterisks, is there something in your history that is impacting you? Trauma.
Like that imposter syndrome. Like, why is somebody paying me? Why is somebody writing me a check just to hear me talk about my special interest? Like, that seems ridiculous, right? And then I realized that I was undercharging. There's like a sales meme of like the customer who's the really, okay, last thing. Sometimes the really tiny customers are the worst to deal with. And I'll just give an example. It's hyperbole, right? But if somebody gives me 50,000 to invest and that's all they, or like, sorry, if they give me $1,000 to invest and that's all they have, right? They may need more hand-holding, more work from me. They've never invested before. On the other hand, I probably wouldn't even charge someone like that. But even if I was, it would absolutely not be worth my time, right? Like compensation wise, what I'd have to charge them on $1,000 for all the work. A client with $1 million, right? And they're like, here's the check, right? Without the questions, right? And I think that's more just, you have to understand it in percentages and ratios. Somebody with $1 million, they might have $10 million. Somebody with $1,000, that's all they have, right? Then that's all they have. You're holding everything they have. So I think that's why it's important to put it in perspective too, right? I think there's a lot of takeaways to that. I'm not sure exactly what they are.
And just to quickly end on something that's in the chat and stuff too. If you are worried about your pricing points in relation to others, again, maybe a company has never hired an autistic presenter and stuff before, or a fire spinner. They don't know what they're getting. And the way that you can individualize it so that you don't have to worry about impacting others in the environment is, hi, this is me, this is what I do, and this is like what my price points are for my experience. Sometimes I give discounts for nonprofits. Like, I'm telling that to people so that they know that this is the Brigid package. They can go to someone else and they might get something else too. Just when it comes to price points and stuff too, if you're nervous about just starting out, everyone takes gigs at the beginning for free for exposure. But you also have, with that imposter syndrome, there's a certain point where no one knows that you're an amateur anymore. You're doing it professionally. So if you can afford to do some of the stuff for free, that's an awesome privilege. And you should be paid for your time and effort.
And what are we talking about next time, Brigid? I think you told me and I forgot already.
I was thinking like contracts, like,
okay.
Like, I mean, that's really dorky. Like,
oh, I mean, I love this. Like, I made my contract gender neutral now. And I just decided, because I mostly because I didn't want to change, she, him, her. So it just says in reference unless otherwise they, them.
Oh yeah, mine's always mine.
I got around to it. But anyway, no, but I love the contract stuff. I like writing contracts.
And if anyone
most people don't.
And if anyone wants to talk about something that's not contracts, this is like gigs, like stuff involving mermaid. That's more eccentric. As we're talking, y'all have probably figured out I'm more of the, well, Andrew, you're creative in your own way. But I'm fully aware that I'm gonna get stuck with the straight guy. I think for some of the financial talk, because understand it. Like that whole example of like client with $1,000. I'm like, oh, I don't have $1,000 to give to someone to make money. That's not how my life works. No. But we can talk contracts. We can talk about, hey, budgeting, or like, how should you try to budget?
Brigid, we want people to come to the next one.
Okay, we want people to come to the next one. Well, you were all yippy about contracts.
Oh, I am, but I don't know if anyone else is. Who wants to talk about contracts? And how to, let's say, okay, how about this? Let me phrase it in a more fun way. After somebody says they want to hire you, after somebody says they want to pay you, what is next? Because it's not just contracts. Contract is like I have a few attorneys. Don't get me started. But one of my favorite ones is like, he's like, Art of War was like the most helpful law book I've ever written, like game theory. He's a crazy Italian from New Jersey. So just go with it. But no, in all seriousness, I think it's about, like you get a job, do you negotiate? How do you know when to negotiate? How do you know? Because a contract is not just a legal, whatever, right? Like I think a contract is really as good as the people who sign it too. But how do you like come to an agreement on the contract? So somebody said yes to having you do the gig, right?
Then what?
What's next? Then what? I like that. That's interesting. So
okay.
Hey, Nancy, thank you so much. Like really appreciate it. Feel free to like send other people. Oh, we might change the time to a little bit later in the day to make it more accessible. Is that okay with everyone? We will give notice. The Facebook event we will update if you sign up through Meetup, which I don't think most people do. We'll update it there. Yeah, so we think
like for the working folks and stuff.
Yeah, but see some of the working. So like, is it better for Autumn? And you guys can go, like, I'm actually going to stop the recording now.